I stood in the living room I grew up in, the same one where my parents once told me I'd never make it. Now it was mine. Greg and Marla Lawson, my parents, stared at me like I was a stranger. My hand trembled slightly as I placed the envelope on the table, the official deed transfer papers. This must be a joke, my mother stuttered, eyes darting to my father. I smiled softly. No joke. You're looking at the new owner. Their silence was heavier than any insult they'd ever thrown at me. I could almost hear echoes of their laughter. Those nights they told me I was too irresponsible to ever own anything. Now the roles had flipped, and the girl they once called a failure had just bought their home. Tell me honestly, what would you do if your own parents told you that you'd never amount to anything, and one day you proved them wrong in the most poetic way possible? Would you forgive them, or let karma speak? My name's Aubrey Lawson, and growing up, I thought home meant love, warmth, and belonging. But in our house, it meant judgment, control, and criticism, especially for my parents, Greg and Marla. My dad worked as a mortgage broker, proud and smug about knowing the market. My mom was a realtor who believed success was measured by square footage. And me? I was their constant disappointment. After college, I wanted to work in community housing projects, helping low-income families find safe homes. But Greg laughed, saying, "You'll never afford one of your own if you chase those idealistic dreams." Mom agreed, rolling her eyes. "You'll be renting for life, honey. Some people just aren't built for ownership." It stung. Every visit home became a reminder that I wasn't enough. They'd flaunt new renovations, invite friends over, and throw little comments my way. "Still renting that tiny apartment, Aubrey? Maybe you should marry someone with a house." The final straw came at Thanksgiving. Surrounded by relatives, Dad raised a toast and joked, "To our daughter Aubrey, proof that not everyone's meant to own property." Everyone laughed. I didn't. That night, driving home in silence, I made a promise to myself. If they thought I'd never afford a home, I'd prove them wrong. Not just by buying any house, but by buying theirs. For months after that Thanksgiving, I couldn't shake my father's voice from my head. Every word replayed like a cruel soundtrack. Not everyone's meant to own property. I cried that night, not because I cared about owning a house, but because the people who were supposed to believe in me never did. I started avoiding their calls. My small apartment felt even smaller, four walls closing in with every reminder that I wasn't successful enough. I worked 2 jobs, mornings at a nonprofit, evenings managing a coffee shop. My savings were barely growing, but my determination was. One night, my coworker Jenna Morales found me sitting outside after closing. I told her everything about my parents, their jokes, the humiliation. She listened quietly and said, "Aubrey, maybe it's time you stop proving them wrong and start proving yourself right." Something shifted inside me that night. I opened a new savings account called Project Freedom. I read books on real estate, credit building, investments. Every lunch break became a learning session. I started saying no to impulsive spending, no to the urge to give up. Meanwhile, my parents kept calling with the same tone. Mom would brag about her new kitchen remodel. Dad would drop housing market facts as if to remind me I'd never catch up. But I didn't argue. I just listened because now I had a bigger plan. Slowly, my tears turned into focus. My anger hardened into resolve. And my dream, once a punchline at their dinner table, started to look like a blueprint for revenge. They thought I was too emotional, too naive, too broke to stand on my own. They had no idea. I was already building my foundation beneath their feet. A year later, things started shifting quietly. I didn't announce my progress. I'd learned that silence was my best strategy. By then, I'd been promoted at the nonprofit to financial coordinator, earning enough to finally save beyond survival. I took online real estate courses at night, shadowed local agents on weekends, and learned every loophole I could about property auctions and foreclosures. Sometimes, I'd drive through my old neighborhood, not out of nostalgia, but strategy. I'd park across the street from my parents' house, engine off, watching the porch light flicker. The home looked the same, but my parents didn't know something had changed. They were behind on their mortgage. I found out accidentally through public records, but I kept that detail close to my chest. When my mom called complaining about unexpected bills, I smiled into the phone. "Oh, that's tough," I said softly. Inside, I was already planning my move. 2 months later, I got the email. Property on Maple Drive entering pre-foreclosure auction. My parents' address. I stared at the screen for a long time, my heart pounding. This was it, the moment that had lived rent-free in my mind for years. I didn't hesitate. Using the savings I'd built, along with a small business grant for my nonprofit work, I made my move. Quietly. Strategically. I hired an agent, used my middle name, Aubrey Lee, for anonymity, and submitted my bid. When the sale went through, I sat in my car and cried, not out of guilt, but from the kind of relief that burns away years of pain. Weeks later, I arranged a meeting under the guise of a buyer interested in the property. My parents greeted me at the door, unaware. My mom smiled, doing her usual pitch. "It's a lovely home, perfect for someone starting fresh." I smiled back. "I agree," I said, placing the documents on the table. "That's why I bought it." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's face turned pale. Mom's voice cracked. You bought our house?" "Yes," I said calmly, sliding the keys across the table. "And I think it's time you both moved on." No shouting. No drama. Just a poetic, perfect silence. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in front of them. I felt powerful, not because I took something from them, but because I finally owned my story. That night, I sat alone in what used to be their living room, my living room now. It didn't feel like victory fireworks or dramatic payback. It felt quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after years of being unheard. I walked through each room, remembering every argument, every time they told me I wasn't enough. I thought revenge would taste sweeter, but what I felt instead was closure. Owning their house wasn't about money anymore. It was about proving that their definition of success didn't define me. I didn't buy it to hurt them. I bought it to free myself from the weight of their doubt. When I saw my reflection in the hallway mirror, I barely recognized her. Not the insecure daughter who once cried over every insult, but a woman who built herself brick by brick. I realized something powerful that night. Revenge doesn't always have to destroy someone. Sometimes, it's just about reclaiming the pieces they tried to break. My parents would never admit they were wrong. And that's okay. Because I no longer needed their approval. I had finally given it to myself. A year later, life looks completely different. I turned their house, into something new. I renovated it, painted over the beige walls they once obsessed over, opened up the kitchen, added light, space, life. Every change felt like rewriting history in my own handwriting. I now rent out the second floor to young women starting fresh, the kind I used to be, underpaid, overworked, underestimated. The rent helps pay the mortgage, and the sense of purpose? That's priceless. My parents moved 3 towns away. We talk occasionally, but things are polite, distant. They never mention the house, and I never rub it in. I don't have to. The silence between us says everything. Sometimes I drive by their new neighborhood, park for a moment, and smile, not out of spite but peace. I finally understand that success doesn't always look like revenge served cold. Sometimes, it looks like peace earned slowly. Standing on the porch one morning, coffee in hand, I whispered to myself. They said I'd never afford a home. Turns out I built one inside and out. And for the first time, I didn't feel like their daughter trying to prove something. I just felt like me, whole, capable, and finally home. They told me I'd never afford a home. They laughed, doubted, and dismissed me like I was destined to fail. But here I am, standing in the doorway of the same house they once said I'd never own. And I've learned something powerful. Sometimes revenge isn't about breaking others down. It's about building yourself up, one brick of self-belief at a time. So tell me, what would you do if the people who should have believed in you were the first to doubt you? Would you walk away or prove them wrong like I did? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow for more stories like mine.